You're going to be working around fuel here, so let's take some basic precautions. As always, you should be wearing your eye protector, and now's a good time to get yourself a set of chemical-resistant gloves. Work in a well-ventilated area away from any open source of heat like incandescent lights or a hot water heater. If you smoke, now's a good time to quit for a couple hours. Also, have a good fire extinguisher on hand and know how to use it. Let the car sit overnight to depressurize the system, and if you can't do that, pull the fuel pump fuse and try and start the car a few times. Open the gas cap to help depressurize it. If you're going to be removing the fuel rails, you will need to remove both the intake plenums, but if you're just changing your injectors, you don't. This procedure is for the 996. Open the engine deck lid and remove the airbox. Begin by loosening the hose clamp holding the boot to the throttle body, green arrow, then squeeze the tabs on the MAF connector to release it, yellow arrows. Now open the harness holder clip, purple arrow, pull out the oil filler tube up out of its clip on the airbox, blue arrow, and finally unbolt the 13mm bolt holding the airbox inside the engine compartment as indicated by the red arrow. And carefully lift the airbox up out of the car. If you have a 3/8, make sure you unplug the connection on the back of the airbox for the resonance valve. To access the left side fuel distribution rail, you will need to remove the coolant tank overflow hose, blue arrow, and the air pump hose, red arrow. I like to gather these hoses and lines together and zip tie them up out of the way. Safely jack up and support the car. Place a jack under the engine and support its weight. Once everything is safely supported, you want to remove the 18mm nuts connecting the engine mounts to the mounts, as shown by the green arrows. Then slowly and carefully lower the engine a maximum of 40mm. Once the engine is lowered and supported, you need to remove the supply and return fuel lines from the fuel rail. The supply line is 19mm and the return line is 17mm. Support the fitting with another wrench when loosening and have some rags on hand as a little fuel may spill out. Here you can see everything that needs to be removed from the fuel rail, purple arrow, on the left side. The fuel lines have already been removed, blue arrows. The wiring clips, red arrows, and the 10mm bolts, green arrows, are next. Move to the right side of the engine and remove the electrical connectors for the oil pressure sender, blue arrows, the clips holding the wiring harness as indicated by the green arrows, and the vacuum line to the fuel pressure regulator, red arrow, and then the two bolts holding the rail, purple arrows. Then just wiggle the injectors out of the manifold. Release the fuel rail from the top of the injectors by removing the small, square retaining clips that fasten and secure the injectors to the fuel rail as indicated by the blue arrow. Use a pair of needle nose pliers to pull this clip off. It pulls off from the front, it's C-shaped, and should slide off with a reasonable amount of force. This task is performed with the rail still installed on the engine, but shown out of the car here in this photo for clarity. The insert photo in the upper left shows the fuel pressure regulator removed from its housing. Simply slide off the clip holding it in place. The insert photo in the lower right shows the injector once you remove it from the fuel rail. The big fat O-ring will offer quite a bit of resistance, yellow arrow. The same O-ring which holds the injector into the fuel rail, red arrow, is also the same type that is used to hold the injector into the manifold. To get the old O-ring off and the new O-ring on, you will need to remove the tip of the injector. The best method I've figured out for removing the tip was to get a small 9mm crescent wrench and apply uniform pressure against the tip. However, this still results in some of the plastic on the tip becoming marred. Pressing up with the wrench using a surprising amount of force will make the tip pop off the injector. At this point, use a pick and remove the old O-ring, install the new one, and press the tip back on. Now how to change the injectors on the 997. Open the engine deck lid and remove the airbox. Begin by loosening the hose clamp holding the boot to the throttle body, green arrow, then squeeze the tabs on the MAF connector to release it, yellow arrows. Now open the harness holder clip, purple arrow, Pull the oil filler tube up out of its clip on the airbox, blue arrows, and carefully lift the airbox out of the car. If you have a 3.8, make sure you unplug the wiring connection on the back of the airbox for the resonance valve. On the left side of the engine, unclip the two coolant hoses and the brake booster pipe on the cross member and lay them off to the side as indicated by the blue arrows. Remove the plastic lines and cable plug from the switchover valve between the intake runners, yellow arrow. Loosen the lines for the brake booster, purple arrow. To do this, remove the plastic protector, push the holder forward, and pull off the line. Put the plastic protector back on right away to keep any dirt or debris out. Then disconnect the vent line for the coolant tank, red arrows. Check for slack in your wiring going to the O2 sensors on both sides, and if it looks like it will be tight, disconnect the wiring. Safely jack up and support the car. Place a jack under the engine and support its weight. Once everything is safely supported, you want to remove the 18mm nuts connecting the engine to the engine mounts, as indicated by the green arrows. Then slowly lower the engine a maximum of 40mm. To remove the left side fuel distribution rail, you will first need to remove the switchover valve, red arrow. Push in the metal wire and pull the plug out. Remove the plug from the camshaft positioning sensor, blue arrow, and insert lower left. Now you can slide the wiring harness duct off of the rail. Remove the two 8mm torque bolts, yellow arrows, that hold the fuel distribution rail to the manifold, and pull the injectors and rail from the manifold as a unit. Remove the plugs from the injectors and set the wiring duct aside. This photo shows how the wiring duct is connected to the fuel rail, blue arrow, the electrical plugs to the injectors, green arrow, and how the injectors sit in the manifold, red arrow. On the right side of the engine, remove the wiring harness duct from the fuel rail by simply pulling it up. It is held in place by plastic clips, blue arrow. Unplug the wiring plugs from the injectors, green arrows, and push up on the wire clip and pull the plug out, and set the harness and duct aside. Unbolt the two 8mm torque bolts holding the rail in place and pull the rail and injectors from the manifold as a unit. The metal clip, blue arrow, can be removed with a small screwdriver or needle nose pliers. There are two O-rings that need to be replaced when you remove the injectors. One is shown, red arrows, and the other is hidden where it sits in the rail. The green arrow shows where the wiring plug goes. After servicing or replacing your injectors, build your injectors into the rail first, making sure the sheet metal clips engage correctly, and reinstall the rail injectors back into the manifold as a unit. The rest of the installation is the reverse of removal. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.